In a small, quiet town in the southern United States during the 1950s, life moved at a slow pace. The streets were lined with oak trees, their branches stretching wide like arms reaching for the sky. The air carried the scent of freshly baked pies from nearby kitchens and the distant hum of cicadas on hot summer afternoons. It was a picturesque place, but beneath its charm lay deep divisions that shaped the lives of everyone who lived there. Eleanor Hayes grew up in this world where opportunities were scarce for someone like her. Her family was poor, living paycheck to paycheck in a modest wooden house painted a faded blue. Despite their struggles, Eleanor's parents worked tirelessly to provide for their children. Her father labored long hours as a mechanic, his hands calloused and stained with grease, while her mother took in laundry from wealthier families to make ends meet. They may not have had much, but what they lacked in material wealth, they made up for in love and determination. Every evening, around the small kitchen table, they reminded Eleanor and her siblings of one thing: education is your ticket out. From a young age, Eleanor understood the importance of these words. She soaked up knowledge like a sponge, devouring every book she could get her hands on. At school, she was always the first to raise her hand, eager to answer questions and learn more. Her teachers noticed her sharp mind and encouraged her to dream big, but outside the safety of the classroom, reality often felt harsh and unkind. At just 10 years old, Eleanor began helping her mother by working as a maid's helper for Mrs. Margaret Whitmore, one of the wealthiest women in town. Mrs. Whitmore lived in a grand house at the edge of town, a sprawling estate with manicured lawns, crystal chandeliers, and polished mahogany furniture. To Eleanor, it seemed like something out of a fairy tale, though not the kind with happy endings. Mrs. Whitmore was known for her strict demeanor and biting remarks. She walked through her home with an air of superiority, her head held high and her voice clipped. From the moment Eleanor stepped foot into the mansion, she felt the weight of the older woman's disapproval. Mrs. Whitmore inspected everything: the way Eleanor dusted the shelves, how she folded the linens, even the way she carried herself. Nothing escaped her critical eye. One day, as Eleanor carefully arranged flowers in a vase, Mrs. Whitmore entered the room. She watched silently for a moment before speaking. "You'll never be a lady," she said coldly, her tone cutting through the silence like a knife. "No matter how hard you try, you don't have the grace or refinement." The words hit Eleanor like a slap across the face. For a moment she froze, unsure of what to say or do. Then, swallowing her hurt, she forced a smile and continued with her task. Inside, however, those words burned. They echoed in her mind long after she left the mansion each evening, replaying over and over again. But instead of breaking her spirit, Mrs. Whitmore's words did something unexpected. They ignited a fire within Eleanor. A quiet determination began to grow inside her, fueled by the desire to prove the mistress wrong. If Mrs. Whitmore thought Eleanor couldn't be a lady, then Eleanor would show her otherwise. More than that, she would rise above the limitations placed upon her by society and carve out a future no one believed possible. Despite the sting of Mrs. Whitmore's comments, Eleanor found moments of joy and inspiration elsewhere. At school, she excelled in her studies, earning top marks in every subject. Her favorite teacher, Miss Anderson, saw potential in Eleanor and took her under her wing. Miss Anderson introduced her to stories of trailblazers, women who had defied odds and achieved greatness despite the challenges they faced. These stories planted seeds of hope in Eleanor's heart, reminding her that she wasn't alone in her struggle. On weekends, when Eleanor wasn't working for Mrs. Whitmore, she spent hours at the local library. It was a small building tucked away on the outskirts of town, but to Eleanor it was a treasure trove of possibilities. She devoured books about history, science, and literature, losing herself in worlds far beyond her own. Each page opened her eyes to new ideas and dreams she hadn't dared to imagine before. Still, life wasn't easy. The weight of expectations and the shadow of Mrs. Whitmore's words followed Eleanor everywhere. At times, doubt crept in, whispering that maybe the mistress was right. Maybe she wasn't destined for greatness. But whenever those thoughts surfaced, Eleanor pushed them aside. She remembered her parents' sacrifices, her teacher's encouragement, and the promise she had made to herself, to rise above. As the years passed, Eleanor grew taller and stronger, not just physically but mentally and emotionally. She learned to carry herself with confidence, even when others doubted her. She practiced speaking clearly and articulately, determined to master the skills Mrs. Whitmore claimed she lacked. And most importantly, she refused to let anyone dim the light within her. By the time Eleanor reached her teenage years, she had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. The shy, uncertain girl who once tiptoed through Mrs. Whitmore's mansion had blossomed into a young woman with ambition and purpose. She still worked for the mistress, but now she did so with a quiet resolve. Every chore, every criticism, only strengthened her resolve to succeed. Though Eleanor didn't realize it yet, her journey was just beginning. The road ahead would be filled with obstacles and challenges, but she was ready to face them head-on. Deep down, she knew that proving Mrs. Whitmore wrong wasn't just about becoming a lady. It was about breaking barriers, shattering stereotypes, and paving the way for others who would follow in her footsteps. And so, with each passing day, Eleanor took another step toward her future, a future where she would redefine what it meant to be strong, graceful, and unstoppable. As Eleanor entered her teenage years, the weight of her dreams began to feel heavier. She knew that education was her ticket out of the limitations imposed by her circumstances, but the path ahead seemed daunting. Her hometown offered little in terms of opportunities for someone like her, a young black girl with big aspirations. Still, Eleanor refused to let doubt creep in. Every morning she woke up with a sense of purpose, determined to make the most of what she had. High school became Eleanor's sanctuary. It was a place where she could escape the harsh realities of her life and immerse herself in learning. Her teachers quickly recognized her potential and encouraged her to aim high. One teacher, Mr. Thompson, often stayed late after class to help Eleanor with her studies. He saw something special in her, a spark that couldn't be extinguished. "You're destined for greatness," he told her one afternoon as they pored over history books. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Eleanor soaked up every bit of encouragement she received, but she also knew that words alone wouldn't be enough. She needed action. So, she worked tirelessly, staying up late, into the night to finish assignments and reading extra materials whenever she could. Her grades soared, and soon she was at the top of her class. Yet despite her academic success, Eleanor couldn't ignore the whispers around her. Some classmates teased her for being too serious, while others dismissed her achievements, saying things like, "What does it matter? She'll never get far anyway." The comments stung, but Eleanor chose to rise above them. She reminded herself of the promise she had made, to prove Mrs. Whitmore wrong and to create a better future for herself. To keep her motivation alive, she started writing down her goals in a small notebook she carried everywhere. On the pages, she scribbled dreams of attending college, becoming a lawyer, and making a difference in the world. Each entry was a reminder of why she was working so hard. When graduation day finally arrived, Eleanor stood proudly on stage as valedictorian, delivering a speech that left the audience in awe. Her voice trembled slightly at first, but as she spoke about perseverance, hope, and the power of education, her confidence grew. By the end, the crowd erupted in applause, many people wiping away tears. Among them sat Mrs. Whitmore, who had reluctantly attended at the insistence of Eleanor's mother. Though she clapped politely, her expression remained unreadable. With high school behind her, Eleanor turned her focus to the next challenge, college. But this step proved even more difficult than she had anticipated. Despite her stellar grades and glowing recommendations from teachers, many colleges rejected her outright due to her race. Rejection letters piled up on the kitchen table, each one a blow to her spirit. For the first time, Eleanor felt the walls closing in around her. Was all her hard work for nothing? Her parents tried their best to comfort her, reminding her that setbacks were part of the journey. "You've come so far already," her mother said one evening, placing a gentle hand on Eleanor's shoulder. "Don't give up now." Those words reignited a flicker of hope within her. Determined not to let rejection define her, Eleanor applied to one last school, a historically black university located several states away. To her relief and joy, she was accepted. The news brought tears of happiness to her eyes, and for the first time in weeks she allowed herself to dream again. Preparing for college was both exciting and nerve-wracking. Eleanor had never been outside her hometown before, and the thought of leaving everything familiar behind filled her with a mix of anticipation and fear. But she knew this was her chance to break free from the constraints of her past. At university, Eleanor found herself surrounded by students who shared her drive and ambition. For the first time, she didn't feel like an outsider. The campus buzzed with energy, alive with discussions about civil rights, equality, and change. Professors challenged their students to think critically and push boundaries, inspiring Eleanor to explore new ideas. In her business administration classes, she discovered a passion for law, a field where she could fight for justice and advocate for those without a voice. Balancing academics with part-time jobs wasn't easy, but Eleanor thrived under pressure. She worked evenings at the campus library, shelving books and assisting students. During breaks, she interned at a local nonprofit organization, gaining first-hand experience in advocacy work. These experiences deepened her understanding of systemic inequality and strengthened her resolve to make a difference. One day during her junior year, Eleanor attended a guest lecture by a prominent civil rights attorney. As the speaker recounted stories of landmark cases and courtroom victories, Eleanor felt a surge of inspiration. This was the career she wanted, one where she could use her skills to challenge injustice and create lasting change. After the lecture, she approached the attorney to ask for advice. "Don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it," the attorney said firmly, looking Eleanor straight in the eye. "There will be obstacles, yes, but your determination will carry you through. Believe in yourself even when others don't." Those words resonated deeply with Eleanor. They reminded her of the fire that had been burning inside her since childhood, the same fire ignited by Mrs. Whitmore's cruel remarks. With renewed focus, Eleanor began preparing for law school. She studied tirelessly for the entrance exams, sought guidance from mentors, and wrote heartfelt personal statements for her applications. When acceptance letters finally arrived, she celebrated quietly but wholeheartedly, knowing how far she had come. Even as she prepared to leave for law school, Eleanor couldn't shake the memory of Mrs. Whitmore's words. They lingered in the back of her mind, not as a source of pain anymore, but as a reminder of her resilience. She realized that the mistress's doubts had unintentionally shaped her into the person she was today, someone who refused to back down no matter the odds. Law school proved to be another formidable challenge. The workload was overwhelming, and the environment competitive. Many of her peers came from privileged backgrounds, having grown up with access to resources Eleanor could only dream of. At times, she felt out of place, questioning whether she truly belonged. But whenever self-doubt crept in, she remembered her journey, the sacrifices her parents made, the rejections she faced, and the dreams she refused to abandon. Slowly but surely, Eleanor carved out her space in the legal world. She joined student organizations, participated in mock trials, and networked with professionals in the field. Her professors noticed her dedication and recommended her for prestigious internships. Through it all, she remained grounded, never forgetting where she came from or the people who had supported her along the way. By the time she graduated from law school, Eleanor had transformed once again, not just academically, but personally. She carried herself with a quiet confidence that commanded respect. Her posture was straight, her voice steady, and her mind sharp. She was no longer the shy girl who tiptoed through Mrs. Whitmore's mansion. She was a force to be reckoned with. Looking back on her journey, Eleanor marveled at how far she had come. What started as a desire to prove someone wrong had evolved into a mission to uplift others. She understood now that her struggles weren't just her own. They were part of a larger narrative about breaking barriers and paving the way for future generations. And though she still had much to accomplish, she knew she was ready for whatever lay ahead. Eleanor's story was far from over, but one thing was certain. She had already begun to rewrite the script of her life, a script that would inspire countless others to follow in her footsteps. Eleanor's journey into the professional world began with a harsh reality check. Fresh out of law school, armed with her diploma and unwavering determination, she stepped into a world that wasn't ready to welcome her. She had spent years preparing for this moment, studying late into the night, excelling in internships and proving herself time and again. But nothing could have fully prepared her for the systemic barriers she would face. At first, Eleanor sent out dozens of applications to law firms across the country. Each cover letter was carefully crafted, each resume polished to perfection. Yet week after week, the responses were the same. Silence. Occasionally, she received polite rejection emails citing vague reasons like not the right fit or lack of experience. But deep down, Eleanor knew the truth. Her qualifications weren't the issue. It was the color of her skin and the fact that she was a woman trying to break into a male-dominated field. The rejections weighed heavily on her, but Eleanor refused to let them break her spirit. Instead, she doubled down on her efforts, networking tirelessly at legal conferences and reaching out to alumni from her law school. One afternoon, while attending a panel discussion on diversity in the legal profession, she struck up a conversation with an older attorney named Mr. Carter. He listened intently as she shared her struggles and offered some sage advice. Sometimes, you have to start where others won't see you coming. Prove yourself there and they'll have no choice but to take notice. Taking his words to heart, Eleanor adjusted her strategy. She applied to smaller, lesser-known firms that might be more willing to take a chance on someone unconventional. Finally, after months of searching, she received an offer from a mid-sized firm in the city. It wasn't glamorous, it paid modestly, and the work was often tedious. But it was a foot in the door. For Eleanor, that was enough. Her first day at the firm was nerve-wracking. Walking into the sleek office building, she felt every pair of eyes on her. The receptionist greeted her warmly, but Eleanor couldn't help noticing the subtle glances exchanged between colleagues. She reminded herself to keep her head high and focus on the task ahead. As a junior associate, her responsibilities included researching case law, drafting memos, and assisting senior attorneys with their cases. It wasn't glamorous work, but Eleanor approached it with the same level of dedication she had shown throughout her life. Despite her competence, not everyone was eager to embrace her presence. Some partners dismissed her contributions, attributing her successes to luck rather than skill. Colleagues occasionally spoke over her during meetings or questioned her judgment in front of clients. At times, Eleanor felt invisible, as though her voice didn't matter, but she refused to shrink herself. Slowly but surely, she began earning respect, not by demanding it, but by consistently delivering results. One case in particular changed everything. A senior partner assigned her to assist on a corporate discrimination lawsuit, believing it was too complex for her to handle alone. The client, a former employee of a major corporation, claimed he had been wrongfully terminated due to racial bias. Though initially skeptical of Eleanor's abilities, the senior partner soon realized she was indispensable. Her meticulous research uncovered key evidence that strengthened their argument, and her calm demeanor earned the trust of the nervous client. When the case went to trial, Eleanor played a crucial role in presenting the argument. Standing before the judge and jury, she spoke with clarity and conviction, weaving together facts and emotions in a way that left everyone in the courtroom captivated. By the end of the trial, even the opposing counsel begrudgingly admitted that she had been impressive. The verdict came back in favor of the client, and the win made headlines in local newspapers. The victory was a turning point for Eleanor. Suddenly, people who had once overlooked her began paying attention. Senior partners started assigning her to higher-profile cases, and colleagues sought her input during strategy sessions. Clients specifically requested her assistance, impressed by her ability to connect with them on a personal level. For the first time, Eleanor felt like she was truly being seen, not just as a black woman or a token hire, but as a talented attorney capable of achieving greatness. Yet, even as her star began to rise, Eleanor faced resistance from unexpected corners. Some partners worried that promoting her too quickly might alienize wealthy clients who weren't accustomed to working with women of color. Others whispered behind closed doors, questioning whether her success was sustainable. Despite these challenges, Eleanor remained steadfast. She knew that proving herself wouldn't happen overnight, but she also knew that she was laying the groundwork for something bigger. Word of Eleanor's achievements eventually reached Mrs. Whitmore, now elderly and living quietly in her mansion. Through newspaper clippings and casual mentions at social gatherings, the mistress followed Eleanor's career with a mix of disbelief and curiosity. The same girl she had once dismissed as incapable of being a lady was now making waves in the legal world. Mrs. Whitmore found herself unable to look away, torn between pride and regret. Meanwhile, Eleanor continued to push forward, driven by a sense of purpose that extended beyond her own ambitions. She became involved in mentoring, programs for young women of color interested in law, sharing her experiences and offering guidance. She wanted them to know that while the road ahead would be difficult, it was possible to overcome obstacles with perseverance and resilience. Outside of work, Eleanor stayed grounded by staying connected to her roots. She visited her parents regularly, bringing them updates on her life and listening to their stories about the old days. Their unwavering support had been her anchor throughout her journey, and she never forgot where she came from. On weekends, she volunteered at community centers, teaching free workshops on legal rights and advocating for underrepresented groups. As her reputation grew, so did the opportunities. Law firms across the country began courting her, offering positions with higher salaries and greater prestige, but Eleanor remained loyal to the firm that had given her a chance when no one else would. She believed in loyalty, not just to institutions but to the people who had supported her along the way. By the time she reached her mid-30s, Eleanor had become a respected figure in the legal community. Her name appeared in articles about rising stars in the field, and invitations to speak at conferences poured in. Yet despite her growing fame, she remained humble. Success hadn't erased the memories of the struggles she had endured. It had only deepened her empathy for others facing similar battles. Looking back on her journey, Eleanor realized that every rejection, every dismissive comment, and every closed door had shaped her into the person she was today. What had once felt like insurmountable barriers had instead become stepping stones, propelling her toward a future she had once only dreamed of. And though she still had much to accomplish, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. Breaking barriers, inspiring others, and proving that true strength comes not from avoiding challenges, but from facing them head-on. Eleanor's story was far from over. But one thing was clear. She was no longer the girl who doubted herself. She was a trailblazer paving the way for generations to come, and she wasn't done yet. Eleanor's career reached a pivotal moment when she was handed the reins to lead a high-profile case that would test not only her legal skills, but also her ability to navigate the complexities of corporate discrimination. The case involved a multinational company accused of systematically sidelining employees based on race and gender. It was a sensitive issue, one that had drawn widespread media attention and public scrutiny. For Eleanor, it was both an opportunity and a challenge. A chance to cement her reputation as a formidable attorney while proving that she could handle the pressure of leading such a significant case. The stakes were incredibly high. If they won, it would set a precedent for future cases and send a powerful message about accountability in the workplace. But if they lost, it could tarnish the firm's reputation and reinforce the biases Eleanor had been fighting against her entire life. As she prepared for the trial, Eleanor knew she couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Every detail mattered, from gathering evidence to crafting persuasive arguments that would resonate with the jury. Her days became a blur of late nights and early mornings. She pored over documents, interviewed witnesses, and collaborated with her team to build a watertight case. Despite the long hours, Eleanor felt alive in a way she hadn't before. This wasn't just about winning. It was about justice. Each piece of evidence she uncovered reinforced her belief that the law could be a tool for change, a means to level the playing field for those who had been marginalized for far too long. As the trial date approached, tensions within the firm began to rise. Some partners expressed doubts about whether Eleanor was ready to take on such a monumental task. They worried that assigning her to lead might alienate certain clients or damage the firm's image. Others argued that her track record spoke for itself and that she deserved the opportunity to prove herself once again. In the end, the decision came down to the managing partner, Mr. Reynolds, who trusted Eleanor's abilities and gave her the green light. The courtroom was packed on the first day of the trial. Reporters scribbled notes furiously, cameras flashed outside, and spectators filled every available seat. Eleanor stood at the podium, dressed in a tailored suit that exuded confidence. Her heart raced, but she maintained her composure, focusing on the task ahead. When she began speaking, her voice was steady and commanding, capturing the attention of everyone in the room. She started by painting a vivid picture of the plaintiff's experiences, the subtle yet pervasive acts of discrimination they endured, the promotions they were denied, and the toll it took on their mental health and careers. She wove together facts, anecdotes, and data to create a narrative that was impossible to ignore. By the time she finished her opening statement, even the skeptical jurors appeared to be leaning forward in their seats, eager to hear more. Throughout the trial, Eleanor displayed remarkable poise under pressure. Cross-examinations can be brutal, especially when opposing counsel tries to rattle you, but Eleanor remained unfazed. She answered questions calmly, countered arguments effectively, and never let her emotions get the better of her. Her preparation paid off. She anticipated every move the defense made and responded with precision. One particularly memorable moment came during the testimony of a key witness, a former executive at the defendant company. The defense attorney tried to discredit the witness by questioning his credibility and motives, but Eleanor stepped in with a series of pointed questions that revealed inconsistencies in the executive's statements. Her cross-examination was so effective that the judge had to intervene multiple times to remind the defense to stay on topic. By the time she finished, the witness looked visibly shaken, and the jury seemed to have shifted in favor of the plaintiffs. Outside the courtroom, the case sparked conversations across the nation. News outlets covered every twist and turn, highlighting Eleanor's role as the lead attorney. Social media buzzed with praise for her tenacity and skill. People admired not just her legal expertise, but also her ability to humanize the victims of discrimination. For many, she represented hope, a symbol of what could be achieved when someone refused to back down in the face of adversity. After weeks of intense deliberation, the verdict finally came in: guilty. The courtroom erupted in applause as the judge read the decision aloud. Eleanor allowed herself a brief smile before turning to comfort the plaintiffs, whose tears of relief said more than words ever could. It was a landmark victory, one that sent shockwaves through the corporate world and inspired countless others to speak out against injustice. Back at the firm, the reaction was mixed. While some partners congratulated Eleanor enthusiastically, others grumbled about the attention she was receiving. There were whispers about whether promoting her further might upset traditional clients or disrupt the status quo. But Eleanor's supporters weren't going to let that stop them. They rallied behind her, arguing that her success was a reflection of the firm's values and commitment to excellence. The debate reached its peak when the topic of partnership came up. Becoming a partner was the ultimate achievement in the legal profession, a recognition of one's contributions and leadership potential. Eleanor had earned it through years of hard work and dedication, but the road to partnership wasn't easy. A vote among the senior partners was required, and opinions were divided. Some argued that making Eleanor a partner would open doors for the firm, attracting new clients and enhancing its reputation as a progressive institution. Others feared backlash from conservative clients who might balk at the idea of working with a black woman in such a prominent role. The discussions grew heated, with tempers flaring on both sides. Ultimately, the decision came down to a narrow margin, with the yes votes barely edging out the no votes. When Eleanor was informed of the outcome, she felt a mix of emotions: pride, gratitude, and disbelief. She had dreamed of this moment for years, but now that it was real, it felt almost surreal. She became the first black partner at the firm, breaking yet another barrier in an industry that had long excluded people like her. The news spread quickly, earning her accolades from colleagues, friends, and strangers alike. But amidst the celebrations, Eleanor remained grounded. She understood that her promotion wasn't just about personal achievement, it was about representation. Young women of color looking to enter the legal profession needed to see someone like her succeeding in spaces where they had historically been excluded. Knowing this, Eleanor vowed to use her position to uplift others, ensuring that the path she had forged would become easier for those who followed. In the months that followed, Eleanor embraced her new role with humility and determination. She mentored junior associates, advocated for diversity initiatives within the firm, and continued taking on challenging cases that pushed boundaries. Her presence in the boardroom challenged stereotypes and forced her colleagues to confront their own biases. Slowly but surely, the culture of the firm began to shift, becoming more inclusive and forward-thinking. Meanwhile, Mrs. Whitmore followed Eleanor's ascent with a mixture of awe and regret. Clippings about her achievements, accumulated in a drawer in the mistress's study, each article a reminder of how wrong she had been all those years ago. Though she never voiced it aloud, Mrs. Whitmore couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in the girl she had once dismissed as incapable of greatness. For Eleanor, the journey was far from over. Becoming a partner was a milestone, but it was also a stepping stone to even greater accomplishments. She knew there would still be challenges ahead, moments when doubt crept in, or when others tried to undermine her progress. But she faced them with the same resilience that had brought her this far. After all, she had already proven that no obstacle was insurmountable, not prejudice, not rejection, and certainly not the dismissive words of someone who underestimated her. As she reflected on her journey, Eleanor realized that true success wasn't measured by titles or accolades. It was about impact, the lives you touched, the barriers you broke, and the legacy you left behind. And in that sense, she had already succeeded beyond her wildest dreams. Years had passed since Eleanor Hayes first stepped into Mrs. Margaret Whitmore's grand mansion as a shy 10-year-old maid's helper. Now, decades later, she stood on a stage in her hometown, delivering a keynote address at the local university. The audience was filled with students, faculty members, and community leaders, all eager to hear from the trailblazer who had become a symbol of resilience and triumph. Among them sat Mrs. Whitmore herself, frail and confined to a wheelchair, her once imposing presence now softened by age. Eleanor began her speech with a warm smile, her voice steady and clear. "When I was a little girl," she said, "I dreamed of a life beyond what I could see around me. But dreams don't come true without effort, and they certainly don't come easy when the world tells you that you don't belong." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "Today I want to talk about breaking barriers, not just for ourselves, but for those who will follow us." Her story unfolded like chapters in a book, each moment vividly recounted. The sting of rejection letters during college applications, the quiet nights spent studying while others doubted her abilities, and the courtroom victories that silenced critics. Eleanor spoke not with bitterness but with gratitude, for the challenges that shaped her, for the mentors who believed in her, and even for the naysayers whose doubts fueled her determination. Her honesty resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom wiped away tears as she shared her journey. As Eleanor concluded her speech, she scanned the crowd, her eyes eventually landing on Mrs. Whitmore. For a brief moment, their gazes locked. There was no anger in Eleanor's expression, only understanding. After the applause died down, Eleanor stepped off the stage and made her way toward the elderly woman. People parted to let her through, sensing the significance of the moment. "Mrs. Whitmore," Eleanor said softly, extending her hand. The gesture surprised everyone, including the mistress herself. Mrs. Whitmore hesitated, her weathered hands trembling slightly, before reaching out to take Eleanor's. "I want to thank you," Eleanor continued, her tone gentle yet firm. "Your words hurt me deeply, but they also pushed me to become more than anyone thought I could be, including myself." Mrs. Whitmore's lips quivered, and for the first time in years, her sharp exterior cracked. Tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered, "I see that now." It was a simple acknowledgement, but it carried the weight of decades. In that moment, something shifted between them. Not forgiveness exactly, but an unspoken recognition of how far they had both come. The encounter left ripples throughout the town. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as a poignant example of personal growth and reconciliation. Some criticized Mrs. Whitmore for her past actions, while others praised Eleanor for her grace. But for Eleanor, the moment wasn't about vindication. It was about closure. She had long since moved past the pain inflicted by those cruel remarks. What mattered now was using her platform to inspire others. In the years that followed, Eleanor dedicated herself to mentoring young professionals, particularly women of color, navigating fields dominated by privilege and tradition. She traveled across the country, speaking at conferences, universities, and community events, sharing her story not as a tale of individual success, but as a call to action. "We are stronger together," she often said. "Lift others as you climb, because none of us succeeds alone." Her work extended beyond motivational speeches. Eleanor founded a nonprofit organization aimed at providing scholarships and mentorship programs for underrepresented students pursuing careers in law and business. She partnered with schools to create pipelines for diversity in professional industries, ensuring that future generations wouldn't face the same obstacles she had. Her efforts earned her numerous awards, though she always redirected the spotlight to the people she served. At home, Eleanor remained grounded, cherishing the simple joys of life. She visited her parents regularly, bringing laughter and stories to their modest kitchen table. Though her father had passed away years earlier, her mother still lit up whenever Eleanor walked through the door. "You've done so much," her mother would say, pride shining in her eyes. "But remember, you're still my baby girl." Eleanor also stayed connected to her roots by volunteering at the same library where she had spent countless hours as a child. She donated books, organized reading programs, and encouraged young readers to dream big. To the children who looked up at her with wide-eyed admiration, she became a living legend, a proof that anything was possible if you refused to give up. Despite her accomplishments, Eleanor never lost sight of humility. She understood that her journey was part of a larger narrative, one that stretched back through generations of activists, pioneers, and unsung heroes who had fought for equality and justice. "I stand on their shoulders," she often said, "and someday, someone will stand on mine." One evening, as Eleanor sat on her porch watching the sun set over the horizon, she reflected on her life. The road had been long and winding, filled with moments of doubt, triumph, and transformation. She thought about Mrs. Whitmore's words, the ones that had once cut so deeply, and realized how much they had shaped her. Without that initial push, without the need to prove herself, she might not have discovered the strength within her. Eleanor smiled to herself, feeling a profound sense of peace, she had proven that true grace wasn't about conforming to someone else's standards. It was about rising above adversity with dignity and purpose. She had redefined what it meant to be a lady, not through elegance or refinement, but through resilience, courage, and unwavering belief in oneself. As night fell and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Eleanor knew her work was far from finished. There were still battles to fight, voices to amplify, and dreams to nurture. But she faced the future with hope, knowing that every step she took paved the way for others to follow, and in that knowledge she found her greatest fulfillment. Eleanor Hayes had started as a girl burdened by doubt, but she ended as a woman who inspired millions. Her legacy wasn't just in the titles she held or the cases she won, it was in the lives she touched and the barriers she broke. She had shown the world that greatness isn't defined by where you start, but by how far you're willing to go. And for Eleanor, the journey was always worth it.